Hey, let's take a little stroll by the water and chat about Interview with the Vampire, Episode 10, No Pain. That's Season 2, Episode 3, and flashback to when Armand first met Lestat, and they had a little bit of a lovey-dovey theater session. And also, Claudia finally joins the coven. Meanwhile, Louis is letting his secret slip out about Lestat to Armand. And then things get a little bit scary before they get sweet, which tends to happen in this show, I think, quite a bit, right? Yeah, it's a real good episode. Let's get into the breakdown. Spoilers are a-coming. Episode 10, No Pain. Again, referencing the Theater of the Vampires, where the victim feels no pain when Santiago bites into them. But also, no pain probably could refer to many things, like the pain in Louis' heart, keeping this secret about Lestat and then spilling the beans and then having to keep... Okay, so first off, we start with Daniel here having a meal break. And then this know-it-all comes along talking about these vampire interviews he's having. This is where the universe starts expanding in this immortal universe that AMC has decided to take on here, because there's also witches and demons and such in this world, not only just vampires. And there's this secret society called the Order of Talamasca, and what they do is they study and investigate, observe the paranormal stuff, like witches and vampires and werewolves and such. And I'm a little bit concerned about this because I don't want the show to deviate too much from the vampire focus. I was hoping they would keep a lot of this stuff out of this season, maybe start introducing it more in season 3 or 4 or whatever. But AMC is also making the Mayfair Witches show, which I watched a little bit of, but then I lost interest because it just wasn't as good or engaging as this Interview the Vampire show. So they're trying to get the audience used to this idea of the society and other supernatural things. Hopefully it won't be detrimental to the story of this season. It definitely adds another little wrench into Daniel's interview process. Okay, so we're going to skip a little bit to the middle of the episode, in which Raglan James, the man from that restaurant, pipes in via hacking skills to Daniel's computer. He says omakase, which is a Japanese phrase that means "I'll leave it up to you," and then he proceeds to basically dump a bunch of files into his computer. He tells them peruse at your leisure, but it seems that they feel like something big is coming. So he mentions the Great Conversion, which was also referenced, I think, in season 1, and I think it's the idea of all these vampires coming together and perhaps revealing themselves to the world, which is an allusion to the future book Queen of the Damned, where vampires reveal themselves to the world and the Queen of the Vampires returns, and perhaps it is time for the vampires to take over. RJ is definitely concerned about it. It does seem like RJ here has some confidence in Daniel, providing him with all this info, and perhaps they're using Daniel and others as a way to prepare the world for this revelation. And then when I get all this documented and released to the public, again, I haven't read the other books. It does look like they're going to make their own adjustments. And I believe this is all still taking place during COVID, so that might have something to do with it too. Allowing the vampires to maybe more easily mesmerize the people during this time of fear and anxiety and uncertainty. At the very least, they're preparing the audience for what's to come in future seasons. Maybe in season 4 or so, when they get to Queen of the Damned, and all this starts to converge along with the Mayfair Witches series as well. But let's get back to the story at hand, with a little bit of a detour back to Armand's past with Lestat. So this is a nice little change of pace. While Louis is still asleep, Armand gives a solo interview, and we get the backstory on how Armand came to Paris and met Lestat. He was assigned to become a coven leader for these religious vampires here, to follow the old ways, and they get stuck in this rut here until a new vampire arrives in town who was sired by one of Armand's deserters, Magnus. Why, it's Lestat. And he doesn't follow the rules. He does as he pleases and decides to flaunt on the stage as an actor, while Armand and the coven are in the shadows, in the sewers. But of course, Lestat is a temptation to all these lesser vampires, and Armand is not going to have it. He has to show his presence. He wants to assert his dominance as the leader of the vampires in Paris. Lestat is being his usual arrogant self, and disses Armand as nothing until Armand shows that, hey, he's pretty powerful. And that scares Lestat, of course, who's still a young vampire at this point. But that bruises Lestat's ego, of course, so he has to make himself known to the others and walks on in with Christ on his shoulder and commits some blasphemies without any care in the world, rejecting the so-called Satan/God that they worship, mocking the old rules, the old laws. And Armand is actually welcoming this because he wants to actually move forward as well, but fears that if these words come from him, his followers won't listen to him. Armand is very much attracted to Lestat's rebelliousness. It probably is tired of living in squalor. Lestat successfully seduces Armand here in the dungeons of Paris. He shows him, hey, we could maybe feed in plain sight on stage and pretend it's all an act. So here we see that he's come up with the idea of the Théâtre des Vampires and reveals that, yeah, his followers have converted and they're all in agreement. And as the years go on, Lestat gets a little bit tired of this acting gig. Of course, Lestat has always been self-centered. He romances Armand here partly for the pleasure, but also to learn his powers. He wants that telekinesis power. He wants that mind-reading ability. So he takes, upsetting his former lover Nicholas here, who I believe had a bigger role in the books. Maybe we'll see more of that later. He even says the special words, "I love you too." But in a matter of weeks, he's gone, leaving behind broken hearts as he does. Louis comes in to finish off the tale a little bit. So that was devastating enough for Armand to say no to love for quite a while, up until Louis showed up. And so let's get back to that. So Louis and Claudia rehearse their lie about the so-called Bruce who made them before Armand shows up to remind Claudia to get to the theater. She's working there now as a lowly vampire. Armand's also there to spend some time with Louis, of course. But Claudia's all in on this vampire coven. She's so enamored by this group that she doesn't seem to notice the red flags. I mean, it's very hierarchical. This coven thing is very much like a cult, and when you're in the inside or adjacent to it, it's hard to even see. She can't even look into Armand's eyes unless he says so. He's in complete control. But so far it doesn't seem so bad, and she doesn't want to go back to the lonely vampire life. Of course, Louis infatuated with Armand and vice versa, so, and he said he won't harm him, and so everything seems dandy right now. So it looks like we're going to spend more time at the theater, which is pretty cool. I welcome it. She gets a little tour of how to dispose of bodies. They use rats instead of burning them. Meanwhile, Louis and Armand take a stroll by the water. A romantic little night out. It's become commonplace with them too now. As Louis tries to explain that he's not really interested in joining the coven. He wants to be free to find himself here in the streets of Paris. But these theater vampires seem to not be so kind to any other vampire that's not in their in-group. They want more order, I guess. You're with us or without us type of thing. And Armand is expected to uphold his mentality. but because he likes Louis so much, he's giving him more leeway. Unfortunately, even though Louis starts to spend more time with Armand, he can't quite escape Lestat, who still haunts him. Armand, of course, senses that Louis is thinking of quote-unquote Bruce. Louis distracts him with a picture and changes the subject. Armand wonders if there's enough room for him in Louis' free-spirited Parisian life. Louis says, yeah, there's room. And about here is where Daniel gets distracted by Talamasca, which we already touched on. So back at the theater, Claudia gets to know Santiago a little better, and vice versa. She sticks to her story about Bruce. As an orphan, he sees some commonality between himself and Claudia. His maker also died, revealing that Armand put him there. Must have done something real bad. He says he deserved it, that his blood was real tasty. Gave him the power to fly and be a better mimic, I guess. He wonders what powers Claudia got from her master, and she says, oh, she's a better liar. He laughs it off, telling her that that will make her a good actor. But I think he suspects something. I don't know, I got a feeling he has some suspicions. If anything, the scene is setting up what's to come in the future. Surely he's gonna find out the truth. Then we get a scene at a nice little jazz bar. Armand and Louis are philosophizing about evil and good. Perhaps a scene Jean-Paul Sartre would write if he did a vampire story. Oh, look at that, he's right there. And he's friends with Armand. A quick little cameo from the philosopher playwright just to establish, I guess, the time period and differentiate it from the timeline of the novel. But all this philosophizing on good and evil has brought to mind Lestat once again. In his head, Lestat is singing a sweet love song to Louis. Come on over to me, come to me. And he can't hold it in any longer, you know. He has to say, he has to spit it out. Such a great scene, pretty much what this whole first few episodes were building up to. Of course Armand knew this already. He just wanted Louis to say it himself. This is seemingly a scary turning point, right? Because Louis has broken one of the top vampire rules. Can't kill another vampire unless you're a coven leader, I guess. Louis claims ignorance. How is he supposed to know all these silly laws? It gets too much, so he escapes into the park, where he sees another vision of Lestat. He tries to really get rid of Lestat once and for all from his mind by, oopsie, randomly killing this guy. He seeks solace in his photo room with Claudia in the background trying to come up with more stories, more fake stories of their past with their so-called maker. This scene is important. They go back to rehearsing their lie. Just as Louis is about to tell Claudia that he spilled the beans about Lestat, things get serious. I believe she's recounting what was in those torn pages of her diary that were missing in the first season. I was actually a bit critical of that moment because I feel like we were lacking her perspective in season 1, and her story of abuse felt like it was more about building on Louis' character arc. But now here in season 2, we're actually circling back and getting to hear what happened through her own words and not just the diary, although this is, I guess, still a memory that Louis is recounting. But coming out of Delaney's own mouth here feels a lot more powerful and fills in those gaps, I think, rectifying what was missing in the first season. And it does make sense that she's now more comfortable talking about it to Louis than before. And it does work better hearing it here than having to read it in her private diary. But yeah, this keeps Louis quiet. He can't quite tell her just yet that he told Armand about killing Lestat. He's gonna have to hold on to that pain some more. So the interview gets interrupted again. This time they're selling some of their artwork. A triptych by Francis Bacon. I guess is one way they make their millions, by selling and procuring art. Though I wonder if this art business is going to be more integral to the story moving forward, or if it's just a little bit of flavor text for the bougie vampire life. It at least gives Daniel some more time to look into these files Talamasca has sent over. He does discover a news article about the Theater of the Vampires burning down. Alas, it appears the end of the theatrics is imminent. I'm sure there's some details in the article he can cross-examine with whatever Louis and Armand tell him. RJ reminds him that he's here to help. So unless there's some 4D chess going on here, looks like they're on his side. Back at the theater, Claudia's getting ready to become a full-fledged member. First, Santiago demonstrates his skill here by telepathically communicating with Armand while simultaneously performing on stage for the audience. He's basically demanding Armand to take care of Louis. Since he doesn't seem to be joining the coven, he has to go apparently. So Claudia's going through the ceremony. She's gifted this little flea circus, which I think references her position in the theater company. She is like a little flea, you know, the little vampire. Soon enough, she's going to be pretty agitated, this little comparison here. As the rules are being read and she agrees, Armand takes Louis down below for a little chat. This seems to be playing out like a mafia hit job, you know. Is he going to get shot in the back of the head with a fireball? Of course we know he's going to survive, but there's still a lot of tension in this sequence. Is Armand going to banish him from the city or something? Everyone's expecting Armand to kill Louis, so for the fact that he doesn't, I wonder what that's going to entail. Louis here seems to be accepting of his death at this point. I guess he feels like Armand is too powerful. He can't quite run away from him, even if he tried. He wants at least Claudia to be safe. He says that eventually her mind will not endure. So I guess that means that all vampires that are made as children are short-lived. I guess their bodies just can't handle being a vampire for so long. But if true, that does add a ticking clock here. And so are they going to break the news to her anytime soon? Louis though says that her mind can handle it. She doesn't need to be ended or anything. She'll survive. Apparently Armand has seen this before, so maybe Louis should trust him. Claudia gets her little present, which is a baby doll dress for her new character that they say she'll be playing for 50 years. Maybe that's an indication that she has 50 years until her mind goes mad, at which point they might have to put her down or something. It's all quite savage, isn't it? Armand references the Savage Garden. Isn't that what Lestat said in season 1? And right when he feels like he's about to be burnt up, Armand opens the doorway back up to the streets. He walked them back home. It looks like he's not gonna die. And then to discuss Lestat, Armand reveals that he used to be with Lestat for a bit. This is where the title of the episode comes in for real, I guess. Louis at last letting it all out. He still feels that pain. He can't get rid of that pain he carries from Lestat. But Armand assures him that he will heal, because he's gone through the same thing. They've both been heartbroken by that devious Lestat. And so they share their first kiss. A lovely silhouetted kiss. For now, let's savor this beautiful moment. Louis invites Armand in, as long as Armand doesn't kill him. And so their relationship begins in earnest, it seems. Is Armand gonna convince the rest to chill out? Or is he gonna have to keep this a secret? Maybe they're gonna pretend that Louis is dead. But then Claudia, what is she gonna do? She's certainly devastated at the realization she's gonna be freaking stuck as a kid on stage forever. I imagine she's gonna want to leave the coven soon, and that's not gonna go so well. If you've seen the movie, read the book, you have an idea what may be happening. But we'll get into that as it comes. Who knows what they'll change. But yeah, such a lovely episode. The show is just so good at tortured romance. I want to be a Parisian vampire too. Okay, maybe without all the killing. Maybe I could just go visit Paris as a goth fairy instead. Anyway, hopefully the Talamasca stuff isn't going to ruin this show. I'm pretty sure it won't get too much in the weeds of it. Surely this season will focus on the theatrics, and the longing, and the kissing, and the bittersweet taste of a lover's blood. What? Well, that will do it for now. I'll see you next time, under the moonlight. Bye.